It's a school where everyone wants to send their kids to, and I feel proud when others tell me that I'm working for such a wonderful school.
행사나 이런 거 있을
Good
때
memory I want to share is when we received appreciation letters from the students that we have learned in certain events. I'm also really glad that we were able to participate in several events during our workplaces, which is quite memorable.
I'm jealous, I'm overzealous. When I'm down, I get real down. When I'm high, I don't come down.
Nothing of me is original. I am the combined effort of everyone I've ever known by Chuck Palahniuk.
But you don't judge me. Cause if you did, baby, I judge you too. No, you don't judge me. Cause if you did, baby, I judge you.
Hello everyone, we are Jenny,
Sean,
And Doug.
the hosts for Through Our Eyes.
today our episode will be quite special as we will talk about some things that most of you would have experienced at least once in your life but didn't really put thought into.
That's right. We will be discussing how place and time affects someone's identity.
We interviewed some of the faculty members here at CI to learn about how their time in an international school shaped their identity. Before moving on, I'd like to ask a question to both of you guys. How do you guys think that space and time affected your identity?
Well, for me, I have moved to Chadwick in third grade. I was living in Seoul, and it was my first time living somewhere else than Seoul. I got to play with my friends who were living in Songdo, and it was an interesting experience as such a young individual. Maybe that's how I got to be such an active person. However, after 3 years, I moved back to Seoul, and I'm currently riding the school bus every morning to get to school. Now, I feel more independent and alone, especially when we're on distance learning. Well, moving from place to place really changed me, but Chadwick has changed me the most. I was able to be involved in lots of leadership positions I couldn't in the past. Went through being part of a sports team in middle and upper school, which really made me who I am. A person who can interchange from being active and inactive. Yeah. Okay, it's starting to get too personal. How about you, Doug?
Well, for me, I attended a Korean public school until 8th grade. As I adapted to my new environment, I was able to discover many new things, especially relating to my identity. My time at Chadwick exposed me to a more American culture where I needed to rely on English for communication and school tasks. I was able to become more social since Chadwick put more emphasis on group work and communication. I also had the opportunity to be involved in school athletics, participating in cross country and JV basketball. This taught me the values of sportsmanship and hard work. I think I wouldn't have been able to learn these kind of things if I had gone to a Korean high school.
Oh, that's cool. Even though my story is less dramatic than Doug's, I totally went through a change as I became a student in Chadwick. I grew up under parents that sent me to an English kindergarten school and to summer camps in the States from the age of 7, an international age of 5. Even though I was exposed to the Western culture from the very beginning, I had to go through 1 year of Korean school. In my memory, this was an equally enjoyable experience as the Chadwick experience. There were definitely parts that were different, like using Korean the whole time and having tests like every week, even though I was like 8 years old. My blurry memory tells me it was a fun but quite stressful experience.
Now we'll move on to actually listening to some extracts of our interviews that we conducted. For your comfort, we spoke Korean into English, and all of the songs that are going to be used for our podcast today are exclusively from our interviewers. Enjoy.
The first interview is from Miss Kwan, who works at the cafeteria. The second interview is from Mr. Lee, who is our security. And the third interview is from Miss Chung, who also works at the cafeteria, but specifically at the snack bar.
보내주는 일 혼자 남아도 괜찮아 가도 괜찮아 세상에 제일 자신 있는 건 내가 언제나 그래 왔듯이 너를 기다리.
Before you came to Chadwick, could you tell us a bit about what you have studied or about your job if you had any before?
Before coming to Chadwick, I was a student attending college, studying in the Department of Food and Nutrition.
Can you tell us how you were able to find a workplace in CI?
After college, I was able to find a workplace in our home, and I was designated to Chadwick as is how I came here.
Oh, so you've told us that it's been your third year at CI. During these years, did you have any challenges or difficulties?
The area here in Songdo is far from where I live, so it has been a problem since this is my workplace.
Then could you tell us if you had some challenges regarding communication, especially since Chadwick is an English-speaking school?
Yes, English is very hard for me because I do not speak English very well. It is hard to communicate with some of the teachers and foreign students.
Just in curiosity, you told us that Chadwick was quite far from where you live. Could you tell us how far?
I live in Incheon, but it's still quite far because Songdo is at the edge of Incheon. If the traffic is really bad, I think it takes nearly up to 1 hour.
Since you've been working in Chadwick, could you tell us some of your good memories or experiences, maybe even accomplishments?
Should I say it as a job or as an environment?
As a job?
When I work in cafeteria to cook the food, I feel great accomplishment when people who eat our lunch tell us that the food was amazing.
Oh.
And also, was it Teacher's Day?
Oh, so when you received presents and or had events?
Yes, I think there was a food truck event on Teacher's Day. Oh no, it was, I think, Labor Day when the food truck was here, and it was quite new that we could experience this in Chadwick.
Thank you.
Before coming to Chadwick, can you tell us a little bit about your previous job or what you have been studying before?
For my previous job, it's very personal, so I won't be able to mention the specific job. But I've worked with my relatives for my job before coming to Chadwick, and I've been studying Chinese.
Oh, that's cool. Moving on, can you tell us how long you have been working in Chadwick and if there were any challenges or problems about communication or anything else working here?
It has been around 1.5 years since I've been working in Chadwick. I have only studied Chinese before, so I couldn't speak English, and therefore communicating with teachers was very difficult.
Well, on the other hand, did you have any good experiences in CI?
While staying in CI, I think my English has improved, and what I also like about the school is that while local Korean schools only focus on academics and grades, our school has more freedom for the students to teach something like PE and
Okay, so since Chadwick is a school that is quite different from other workplaces, can you tell us about the differences about your friends and relatives' workplaces compared to the workplace here at CI?
I think the biggest difference is that we get to have breaks along with students. Since Chadwick has very long summer breaks, I think it's what makes Chadwick different from other workplaces.
네, 감사합니다. 혹시 체드윅에 오시기 전에
Hello. Which job did you have or which field did you study before coming to Chadwick? Can you tell us about it?
Before coming to Chadwick, I was a student attending college studying in the Department of Food and Nutrition. I was preparing for an exam in this field of study and I received a certificate. This is how I was able to apply for the company Our Home and was designated to work in Chadwick.
Okay, just out of curiosity, how long have you been working at CI? Can you also share with us some difficulties or challenges you might have faced while working in CI?
Can I share some good memories I had in CI?
Sure, why not?
So it's been 6 years since I have been designated to work in CI, and a good memory I want to share is when we received appreciation letters from the students that we have learned in certain events. I'm also really glad that we were able to participate in several events during our workplaces, which is quite memorable.
Okay, thank you. As you know, Chadwick is an international school and is quite different from other workplaces. Could you tell us about the differences between your friends or family's workplaces compared with Chadwick?
First of all, I was able to meet a lot of foreign students from different countries, which was a quite interesting experience, and I was able to easily approach cultures in different countries, and I was able to break some stereotypes I had from previous experiences.
So there weren't any difficulties in the process?
Yes, I enjoyed all experiences.
감사합니다.
잊을 순 없지만 붙잡고 싶지만 이별 앞에서 할 수 있는 건 좋은 기억에
Mr. Lee, Ms. Kwan, Ms. Chung for being engaged in our interviews. As Chadwick students, we don't really have opportunities to talk directly to the custodial staff, so it was a great opportunity to get to know them through the interview process. So, what do you think was interesting from this information?
So for this information, I think age was really important. So for Miss Chung, she has been working in CI for 6 years and has graduated from college before coming here. And for Miss Kwan, similarly, she graduated from college and came to Chadwick also, and also very young. For Mr. Lee, he has only worked in CI for like around 1 year, attended college before, so they all have the similarity that they have attended college before coming to CI. And they were able to adapt to the CI community probably more easier, and they also have more interaction with students, so therefore more interaction with the Chadwick community, I guess.
Okay, cool. I also thought it was cool that they enjoyed the fact that there are breaks to school. They also appreciated the thank you notes that the students gave them on Labor Day and on Teachers' Day. And I think that being able to appreciate breaks, being able to appreciate these thank you letters, I think those things are possible because of the small age gap that we have with those staff, right? So I think it was quite interesting to see how that worked out.
Yeah, it really shows us that they are all probably in their late 20s or early 30s, which really proves to us how like they have a stronger bond with the students compared to the other interviews that we're going to share with you today. And also, it's first job for all of them, which means that the language barrier that are quite low, especially because the Mr. Lee talked about how he learned Chinese. So we can also see that these people are more international in a way to work in an international school, and they at least know how to speak English a little bit in order to communicate with the students and teachers. So yeah, I could see those stuff.
Great, let's move on to our next interviewers, which are Mr. Kim, the bus driver, and Mr. Park, the custodian.
Before coming to Chadwick, can you please share with us about your previous job or what kind of studies you have done in the past or anything else?
I was previously a bus driver for the tourism buses, similar job as of now.
Oh, that's cool. How long have you been working for the tourism industry?
I have been working for 7 years.
Then can we ask you how long have you been working since you came to Chadwick?
It has been around 3 years since I have been working as a bus driver for CI.
Okay, so when you first came to Chadwick 3 years ago, were there any difficulties or challenges you have faced?
When eating in the cafeteria, a lot of the food that is provided is for students. Since us as adults have different tastes, the food didn't really fit us.
Have you been experiencing any difficulties regarding communication?
English?
Yes.
So while I've been working in Chadwick, there's almost no opportunities to speak English with another person. And in the buses, the bus TA does most of the communication with the students, so I haven't really faced any difficulties or challenges.
Oh, okay. Then on the other hand, were there any good memories or experiences where you felt like accomplishment, a feeling of accomplishment or happiness?
After we escort students to the designated bus stops, we have to park the buses in a parking lot. And when talking with other people about Chadwick, the reputation of Chadwick is really high, and people think it's a great school. It's a school where everyone wants to send their kids to, and I feel proud when others tell me that I'm working for such a wonderful school.
사람들이 그렇게 막 선망의 대상이 되는 거야. 아, 좋은 학교 운영하시네, 뭐 이렇게 부러운 눈초리로 이렇게 그런 게 좀 자부심이 생겨.
네.
운영하면서.
네, 감사합니다.
첫 번째 질문이 뭐냐면 이제 혹시 이제 체드웨이
Will you please tell us about your brief description of how you have lived and which type of work you did in the past?
I lived honestly.
아, 네.
I have worked as a construction worker for 20 years and have lived honestly.
아, 네.
Oh, just curious, how long have you worked in Chadwick?
I have worked since 2013, so for around 8 years.
Then can you share any challenges or times where you felt uncomfortable when you first came to CI?
It was my first time working as a custodial staff in my life, and it has been very challenging from the beginning.
So were you uncomfortable with anything about the students speaking in English?
Since we don't get opportunities to talk with students a lot, I haven't felt any challenges so far.
What about for the teachers?
For communication with the teachers, we just have to look at the teachers and communicate non-verbally. If possible, we don't go and clean rooms where teachers are there, so yeah.
Okay, so did you have any special experiences when you came to Chadwick?
There was nothing so special about coming to Chadwick, but I am turning quite old, but I get to work and earn my living by working here at Chadwick, so it helps me in a lot of ways.
So you've told us that you have worked as a construction worker in the past. So how is the working place different from Chadwick?
There are so many differences, but I can't really summarize it concisely.
Okay, thank you.
여기는 학교고,
네.
학교고 이제 건설회사는 이제 건물 같은 걸 지으러 다니니까
네.
뭐 차이점은 많은데 뭐라고 딱 얘기할 수는 없네.
아, 네.
많은 세상에 믿을 사람 바로 당신뿐.
Thank you, Mr. Kim and Mr. Park, for being engaged in our interviews. I don't know about you guys, but I felt like the experiences were quite different from what we saw in the last set of interviews. What do you think, Sean?
So they don't mind working in such a good environment, but they work in Chadwick because of the job, not the environment. First of all, the bus driver doesn't really like the food Chadwick provides, so he actually goes out and eats. And the workers also do not stay in school often. They only come during work times. For the bus driver, Mr. Kim, he only arrives at the end of school around 3 or 5, like the 2 bus times. And for Mr. Park, he also arrives at the end of school, which is around 5. So they don't really interact with a lot of students or teachers. Yeah.
Right, and in contrast, I also saw how Mr. Kim and Mr. Park said that they did not have opportunities to speak with students or teachers often. For Mr. Kim, he told us that he has the TA teacher who does most of the communication with the kids on the bus. And for Mr. Park, he told us that he just avoids interactions with students and teachers, and mostly because he works at a time where all students and teachers are gone. He told us that there isn't much interaction to start with. So I thought that was a major difference.
Yeah, it's really reasonable because for all of the younger staff members, this was their first job, so they seem very passionate. So they really care about the environment they're in, interacting with students, getting thank you letters, etc. But here, these custodial staff from the bus drivers are true that they earn fame and interest from the ones around them having a similar job as them, as the bus driver has mentioned. But also he's just simply glad that he's able to have a job, as he is quite old, and he says that Chadwick is also a great working environment afterwards. So I think it's really a huge difference from the younger staffs that we have interviewed before.
Alrighty, now I feel like we have talked quite a bit about the place and the backgrounds of the people and how their experiences in life affected their identity. Shall we move on?
Exactly, but we definitely have more to talk about. Alright, we'll be taking a quick music break. See you all soon.
Okay, I think we can all agree that the stories were all unique in their own sense, but also somewhat understandable as Korean students who have been through the stage of, going to international school. How about we discuss it more in depth?
Sounds great. So, do you think age was a factor impacting the custodial staff's working experience? I personally thought that compared to the younger security staff, the older cleaning staff struggled a bit more adjusting to the Chadwick community. Additionally, I tried to interview around 3 to 4 custodial staffs on the third floor. Except for that one person, everyone else didn't really want to get interviewed.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I guess it kind of makes sense because I guess especially for those custodial and like cleaning staff, it is not as common for them to like directly communicate with the students as we have heard from Mr. Kim, the bus driver, and Mr. Park, the cleaning staff. So I think it is partially because of the barrier in language and the uncommonness of like talking to a Chadwick students, especially because they will assume that Chadwick students will speak English to them.
Yeah, that may be true, but I think it could also be simply due to the fact that we tried to interview them while they were extremely busy, as that was the only time we had for conducting the interview, but that time coincided with their extremely busy work time, so I think we need to think about that a bit more.
Meanwhile, when we went to the security guard, he was quite open to our interview. So by this, I think we can know that the custodial staffs are still struggling to adjust to the Chadwick community as they are kind of avoiding the times where students and teachers are at school. And now I think that Chadwick has been quite an influence to their identities.
I also think that it's more like they're struggling, but also like because I guess they don't really like care about communicating with like the students, especially because them having a job is just more important to them. So I think it's not like they're stressing over like working at Chadwick, but it's more like they're just enjoying their work and just doing it and whatever they have to do at our school. Yeah.
Yeah, listening to their stories, I think that their backgrounds before the staff came to CI was a big distinguishing factor. So for the security staff, Mr. Kim, he said he was exposed to English via high school or university education. This was also the case for Ms. Kwan. And looking at South Korea's development, this is actually quite understandable because we began to prioritize English from about the 1990s, right? Maybe the 1980s. So I think that timeline matches perfectly with the average ages of the security staff.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, Doug. For the cleaning staff, most of them were older women. I think that women given the opportunity to pursue education much less than English is a very recent development. Since South Korea back in the 1960s was still very patriarchal, women didn't really have a chance to have big dreams. I think this is why most of the cleaning staff struggled to use English and therefore had a harder time adjusting to this familiar environment.
Absolutely. To add on to what I said before, there was a boom for English education after the 1988 Seoul Olympic and the 1997 IMF. I think these two events were huge milestones that made a lot of South Korean citizens feel the urge to study English to follow the trend of worldwide globalization.
I also think that the disparity is even more obvious regarding the fact that we are in South Korea because this country went through a very rapid transition compared to all the other countries. So it's like the 20-30 year difference. Like it makes a huge change in their identity and how they view the world and in particular their job in CI.
Yeah, I totally agree. The very rapid transition that South Korea went through makes the disparity so evident and clear to us even within those 3-minute interviews that we have conducted. So before we move on, remember how the younger staff was easier to interview? I mean, I was rejected 2 times by the cleaning staff.
Yeah, I remember. Sean, do you remember when we went to the nurse's office?
Yeah.
The younger nurse seemed to be considering to accept our interview when his boss, who looked a bit older, cut him off.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, why do you think there were factors that differentiated in the different staffs?
Maybe it's because of the social norms that involve and also the culture.
Social norms? What do you mean, Jenny? Can you please explain?
So, from what I know, back in South Korea, everybody was like very busy, right? I mean, even nowadays, you can see how the South Korean society is always like 빨리빨리 or quickly. I think this is derived from the hungry mindset that our grandparents' generations had, especially because, as I have talked before, in older times, South Korea was very poor post-war. So because the entire society was poor and starving, everyone had to move very quickly. Since they remember how hard those days were, I think the habit of not wasting time and finishing work quickly became the part of their lives.
Compared with them, the younger generation would have had a comparably easier time. Since South Korea developed so quickly, I think that a difference between each generation is really huge.
Yeah, especially after the economic boom, we had the miracle of the Han River. After that, the Korean government started focus on advocating values like raising only 2 children instead of like 5. You know how in the early 1900s or maybe the 1800s, people focused on having as many children as possible to help with farming or housework or to support one of their family members to make them successful. I think after the miracle of the Han River, after economic development, parents started focusing more on providing a higher quality of life for their children instead of pushing them. So I think this slowed down the social norms such as like the 빨리빨리, quickly norm. And yeah, I think that's what happened.
On that note, have you guys seen the movie Ode to My Father or 국제시장?
Oh yeah, of course. I cried at the theater watching it. Did you watch it too, Doug?
Yeah, of course. I watched it with my grandparents. I also thought it was very touching, even though I didn't cry. Why did you mention it though, Sean?
I just thought that Ode to My Father captures the spirit of what we talked about today. And in the movie, the story follows the main character throughout the major events in the early 1900s and early 2000s. It reflects upon how much the older generation sacrificed to create South Korea that we are living today. It also highlights the importance of understanding cultural differences that may come from differences in age.
Yeah, I think today's discussions gave us an opportunity to reflect upon how much the surroundings can impact a person's identity. Even though we don't know this fact, when we go around school talking in English with our friends, small little details can impact surrounding people with the custodial staffs. Maybe it could be the best if you could just say hi and say we appreciate them for doing such hard work for this Chadwick community from now on.
Absolutely. We are all from various backgrounds and most of our identities are shaped from all the experiences we had in our life. Like a little mosaic.
Yeah, I started learning French because of my grandmother who used to teach French in a Korean high school.
My English accent is probably from the first place I learned English.
And my love for tennis came from a recommendation from my dad because he played tennis in college.
Just like this, we all have our own stories affected by the place and time we have lived in. It is important to not only respect those backgrounds of the custodial staff in our Chadwick community, but also anyone we might meet in our life because everything we see and judge from a person is only through our eyes.
'Cause I got issues, but you got 'em too. So give 'em all to me and I'll give mine to you. Bask in the glory.